Well, hello, my office workplace warriors, and welcome to another episode of Dear HR Diary by Manage with Heart, the unfiltered truth you wish they taught you in management school. I am excited because I have a great guest on the podcast today. I can't wait to introduce you to Mr. Scott Rupp. Did I say it right? Rupp?
You did.
Yay. Working in human resources, I always get the challenge of saying people's last names or their first names. And it always makes me think of school teachers because school teachers have that terrible thing where they have to pronounce kids' names. So it always cracks me up.
Ron.
Yeah, exactly. Oh my gosh, you've seen the same video I have.
Yes.
Jaquil.
Yeah. I came from the political world, so as long as you filled in the oval next to my name, you could pronounce it however you wanted. So.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome. Well, let's dig into your biography here. Playing in 2 Little League World Series. I'm a huge baseball fan, so I was excited to read that. Eating dinner in the White House 3 times before the age of 12. A successful political career, appearances on Dr. Phil and other national TV shows, and influence over some of the largest publicly traded companies in the United States. Scott Rupp has lived an exciting life, an amazing life, I have to add. That's pretty cool. But the drive to do more and go higher left him hurtling through life at an unsustainable pace. And I think a lot of us can relate to that, Scott.
Mm-hmm. That
is until one of the rarest genetic disorders on the planet, a car bomb, and a tension-filled poker game with 6 felons. Reading this biography, I was like, did you write this book? I mean, is this like a made-for-TV movie? For Scott to recognize he could not continue life at this pace. Scott then devoted his time and efforts to taking the principles of sustainability and applying them to people to understand how sustainable people can significantly enhance the growth and success of companies and communities across the globe. So this man is global. A renowned public speaker, Scott's entertaining and enlightening presentations inspire and help audiences take action to understand why they do what they do. Maybe he can help me understand why I do what I do. Reevaluate the sustainability of their efforts and provide companies and their leaders the tools they need to meet the needs of their workplace consistently. Scott has his Master of Science in Sustainability and his MBA. Where'd you get him from?
University of Denver for the Master of Science.
Okay.
And Lindenwood University in St. Louis for the MBA.
Awesome. Okay. His wife, Carissa, is a mental health counselor whose knowledge and understanding of human behavior and the human brain influenced Scott's work immensely. I can only imagine y'all's dinner conversations.
She is as brilliant as she is beautiful.
Oh, they live in St. Louis, Missouri with their five teenage children. I'm going to drop some information about Scott in the show notes, so you will be able to connect with Scott as well. But welcome to the podcast, Scott.
Great, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
I'm excited. Scott and I connected on so many different. There were so many things that we had in common when we first did our discovery call, and I thought this would be fantastic to have him on the podcast. First of all, my love of baseball is deep. I grew up going to Texas Rangers games, and this year, well, I guess last year, the Texas Rangers won the World Series. So shout out to my Rangers. It was a fabulous, fabulous run. Finally, I think they were there 50 times.
And I'm in baseball heaven. I'm in St. Louis with the St. Louis Cardinals. So it's like another phenomenal franchise.
That is actually, we stopped on our way to Kentucky. We stopped and watched a St. Louis Cardinals game, and that ballpark is beautiful. We were there at sunset. You can actually see the sunset over the stadium. It's really quite lovely. I highly encourage people to go out there and visit that stadium. Okay, so 2 Little League World Series. What position did you play?
Oh, back then, there was like shortstop and pitcher, and as I got older, I played in the outfield. But back then, it was the infield and pitching.
Oh my gosh! So you have an arm?
I used to.
He's like, once upon a time.
yeah, I did. Was blessed and grew up in a baseball family, so it was a cool opportunity I got to participate in, playing with kids from different countries, and it was just as 12, 13-year-old kid, it was awesome.
Would you say that kind of helped shape you as a leader? You got your early start being on a baseball team?
And well, I mean, just, dealing with various different kids and working towards the same goal. So yeah, it does, it does help you even on those early ages of trying to get people to align everything so you can be successful.
Isn't that crazy? The things that we learn as we're growing up, just from if we go back and look at the workforce and or look at how we were raised. My mom worked for the same company for 30 plus years, as did my stepdad, and very loyal. And it's
Mm-hmm.
interesting to see how things are nowadays,
Yeah.
especially particularly with Gen Z or Gen X or
Mm-hmm.
whatever generation you want to jump into. And I'm guessing to the point that that really helped you decide to write your book, which is I Quit: Winning the War for Top Talent.
Yeah. So, I mean, same thing here. My dad was 41 years at Ozark and TWA Airlines. And, my mom never worked outside the home. And the days of, 40 years of work and here's the gold watch and retirement. And those were long gone, kind of brought into by the 401k world in the late 80s. And things became more portable and people started switching jobs. I'm Gen X, so I'm expected to
Woo!
switch jobs 7 to 10 times in my lifetime. But you're right. The younger generations, they're switching every 3 years and they're hopping industries. They're all over the place. So just the generational nature of work has changed significantly in our lives.
I 100% agree. And being a hiring manager or even being working in human resources, I'm trying to tell a hiring manager that a 2 year, like 2 years is good, people.
Yeah, yeah.
Actually, right now I take 6 months.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And it's okay if they came from another industry. It doesn't have to be the same industry because they're industry hopping as well.
Do you think I know this is a question that I've seen. Do you think the pandemic actually changed the nature of our workforce? Do you think that played into a whole lot of it? I know it's almost a rhetorical question anymore, but
Totally,
we're 2 years
totally.
out, right? Well, 2 years,
Yeah,
2 years officially out. So looking back, I think that's enough data that we could kind of say, oh,
yeah,
holy
yeah.
crap. Yeah, things have changed.
So that's the whole premise of the book. I Quit: Winning the War for Top Talent is we look at what happened in the pandemic and the economic recession that happened. What was different? I mean, we had recessions in the 80s and 90s to 2000s and then the Great Recession, but what was different about the pandemic that it is causing this massive disruption in the workforce? So that's kind of the whole premise of the book, is that the pandemic created significant emotional events for people, and that caused, I mean, the definition of a significant emotional event is something, it's so mentally arresting it causes you to change your values
Mm.
or your entire value system. And that's what we're seeing post pandemic. The pandemic gave us the great resignation. People were like, I'm out of here, I'm not doing this anymore. And then now we're in the what I call the great disconnect, where the labor and management are just so disconnected. But it all goes back to the pandemic.
So we're talking about this emotional, or this, like, my values are changing and everything is really kind of up in arms now. What are you seeing that people are searching for? Like, I'm leaving a company because of this.
Yeah. So, I mean, so basically what happened is pre-pandemic, the strive for productivity and, you got to be more productive and we got to hit that next quarter earnings. Okay, give me more, give me more. What it really was doing was just masking an exhausted workforce.
Mm.
And so what happened during the pandemic, it was slowed things down enough to people that kind of had a pause button going, well, why am I driving 45 minutes one way to work where I can do it at my kitchen table? And why do I have to take off, vacation time to take my kid to the doctor? And they started questioning things of this nature, going, why am I working this hard, to pay for all these toys in the garage that I have no time or, God, no energy to use? And they started to question everything. So when people started to leave, there's fascinating studies by McKinsey of why did people quit their job. I mean, you remember in August of 2021, 4.3 million people in 1 month just up and quit their job. And so when they
I
start,
like, and the
yeah,
stock market went crazy.
yes,
It was like,
exactly.
holy beep, insert
Yeah,
beep here. What the hell is happening? And
yeah,
I remember that very distinctly.
yeah. And so when they went back and they started doing the research, they were smart because they interviewed all these people like, why'd you quit your job? Why'd you quit your job? But they didn't stop there. They went back and they asked their employers and said, hey, why did Sally quit her job? Why did Bob quit his job? And then they compared the results. And what you found was that, the top reasons people quit was that they didn't feel valued by their employer. They didn't feel valued by their immediate manager. There was no opportunity for personal development, or they had no flexibility in their work schedule, But then when you went and they did the employers, they said, well, why did they all quit? The number one answer, number two was such a distant second. The number one answer was, well, they just want more money. So what was huge was money didn't even come in the top 5 answers of all these millions of people that quit. But all the employers just were like, bah, it's just money. But no, it was culture. It was value. It was being filled value, not money. And so, right there, that one study showed the huge disconnect between employers and labor. And then it's just gotten worse.
It's crazy you bring that up, like where employers are like, they left because of money. And I'm like, I beg to differ. Yeah. I left a job in the pandemic too. I wasn't laid off. I actually left a job because the culture was so toxic to my mental health that I took a minimal salary, and I'm talking minimal, like $1,000 salary increase to go to work at this other company because I was so burned out and it wasn't necessarily the work because I absolutely loved what I did.
Right.
But I was bullied at work by a coworker. And I think people that listen to me just kind of laugh because they're like, who bullies HR? And I'm like, you wouldn't really?
Right.
And I took it to a supervisor and I said, I'm being bullied. And the supervisor was like, well, you need to figure out a way to get along. And I'm like, listen, this is a cry for help. And I'm a very vocal person. And if I bring in this crap to you, that means I've done everything I possibly can to do it. So fix it.
Yeah.
And I think you saw a lot of that exiting when you're talking culture. People are exiting bad bosses. People are exiting because they see other coworkers getting away with stuff and not being called out on it. They PTO, people are like, I want more time off. I realize that I'm missing my, 2-year-old daughter's birthday or my 5-year-old, son's t-ball tournament. So I think it's such an interesting, we switched from such a driven society that's driven on who can have the fastest car, the nicest pair of Louboutins, for those of you that just collect shoes like me. To now it's like, okay, that shift or that paradigm is now like, I want to spend more time with my family. So, or I want to spend more time doing something that benefits me, not financially necessarily, but benefits, my own mental health. And I think employers are needing to make that adjust. Maybe you could speak to how employers can make that adjustment, but I think employers are needing to make that adjustment to be able to retain or even particularly retain, right? Because it costs so much to bring somebody on board, but particularly to retain or recruit candidates. What are you seeing out there?
Well, Microsoft did a huge study right after the pandemic. And, the first thing they found was that, basically all this productivity was masking this exhausted workforce. But the second thing that they found was that the leadership was so out of touch with the employees and they needed a wake-up call. And so what the pandemic did is exactly what you just described. It was a significant emotional event. So what do I mean by that? So for your listeners, think of it this way. You go to the doctor and the doctor says, hey, you need to quit smoking, exercise, and lose weight and eat healthy. So what do? You go back the next year and he says, hey, you need to quit smoking. You need to quit drinking. You need to exercise. And you ignore it for 7-8 years until you have a minor heart attack. And then you're like, oh, I better quit smoking and quit drinking and exercise. So it took something significant enough to get you out of your routine. And that's what the pandemic was. The shutdown was just long enough for people to question, why am I putting up with this toxic environment of work? It's not worth it. And I changed my value system. I don't care as much about that extra car and that extra pair of shoes. I value my mental health. I value my family time. What we saw during the pandemic was a kind of a resurgence of the home. Like an antidote is the number of swimming pools that were added to homes the year after the pandemic was up 800% in the United States.
No way.
Yes.
What?
And that's with supply chain issues.
Holy crap.
It was
Okay,
huge.
I wanted a pool.
Yeah, but where you spend your money shows me what you value, and that significant of an increase showed people were refocusing on the home and the quality time and time togetherness, and that's where they were putting their money. And so they started to reevaluate that work relationship, and it's like, why should I put up with this bullying? And one definition that I really like on culture is culture is also determined by the behavior that leadership tolerates. So if they're going to tolerate bullying and, well, you just need to go figure it out, and they're going to reward people for bad, it's like, hey, I don't want to be here. This is not worth it to me. And it sounds to me like that was your significant emotional event to say, like, no, this no longer fits with my value systems. I want something more. And then interesting, you said it only took $1,000 pay increase.
Right.
All the studies show that if you have an engaged employee, aka a happy employee that's engaged, it takes at least a 20% pay increase for them to consider leaving. But if you have an unengaged or an unhappy employee, they'll leave for nothing.
Absolutely. And I'm testament. I probably would have left even at, I'm not going to say a significant salary cut, but I probably would have left even at a salary cut, because I had just gotten to the point that was like, no more of this crap. I can't deal with this.
And I don't know if your listeners saw, it was 2 or 3 weeks ago, Ford came out with their, like, they do this general survey of like, what kind of the trends are they seeing? And like 16,000 people were surveyed, multiple countries. And they found that, 70% of employees would take a pay cut, if they had a better work-life balance.
Holy crap. So 70%.
70%, 7 out of 10. And when you break into the data, it was like 60% of millennials said they would take a 20% pay cut to have a better work-life balance. I mean, so it really shows how people, especially the younger generations, are wanting a better work-life balance in exchange for all the extra monetary things that come along with it.
And here's the deal, managers, as you're listening to this. If you're driving to work today, I want you to go in and I want to count your employees, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So you have 10 employees. Okay. So you figure out which 6 would leave your organization today.
Yeah, exactly.
And I'm going to guarantee you, it's probably not the 6 you want to leave.
That's so true. That is so true.
The remaining ones are going to be those 3 that you're like, God, why can't, or those 4, I can't do math. Those 4, God, I wish they would leave. But no, those are the ones that stick around.
So in my book, I have a chapter that's called Why is the Dead Sea Dead? And I go into, the Dead Sea, it's so salty because it used to be not that way. It was a regular body of water because, water would pour into it and then it would also pour out to the Mediterranean Sea. But over time that, stopped to get blocked. And so now only water flows into it and then it evaporates. And that's why all the salt is left. And so it's like, if you're not pouring into your employees, like they're pouring into you and giving you your work time, and all you're doing is just taking from them, the good employees are going to up and evaporate, and you're going to be left with all the downright salty employees that you do not want to have, so kind of just what you were saying.
That's the best example. Like, get out your life raft and see if you can float on the Dead Sea.
Right.
See how far you can get.
Right.
That's great. That's a great example. And it's interesting because if we think about the impact as managers that you have on your own employees, it's the number one reason people leave organizations, or
True.
Studies have shown the number one reason people leave organizations are managers. Mm-hmm. So what are some simple things, not complex, what are some simple things you think, or some pieces of advice that you could give managers as they drive into work today and they're trying to figure out those 6 employees that are disengaged or quite possibly could be looking at leaving?
Well, I mean, the very first thing, and it's high level, but you can break this down to so many more subsections, is you really got to get to know the people that work for you or the people that you're leading. And I don't mean, I know Sally, she has 2 kids, her husband's name's Bob, no, you got to get to understand, like, what do they want out of their career, and what motivates them, how do they want to be appreciated, what's their language of appreciation, what is their learning style, how do they best learn out of all the different ways that people learn. And the more that you can understand more about that person, the better that you can lead them, because most people lead the way that they want to be led or the way they were led, and that doesn't
Right.
mean that that is going to connect with all of your people. You know, I'm a big believer in behavior analytics, because I think you can kind of use behavior analytics to kind of predict behaviors, and if you can predict behaviors, you have a pretty good idea of predicting some results. But understanding who that person is, what motivates them. You know, I tell this story when I give my talks. Is that, you know, there's a guy on that works for me. He is amazing, brilliant. But I know that if I do not stop and say hi to him in the morning, that he will internalize it the rest of the day. If he sees me in the hallway, I have got to stop. Hey, how are you? What's going on? Just 2 minutes of interaction. Because if I don't, he internalizes, he thinks I'm mad at him. And when that happens, his productivity just falls, you know, to the floor. But if I take a minute or two and just, hey, then he feels engaged, and then boom, he is a rock star. But I know that about him, and I know that I have to do that because I understand him and I understand his personality, and just those one little things can just make his productivity between night and day if I do that.
Well, it's Scott, it probably does something to your own mindset too. So like when you're talking to this gentleman and it's just the 1 or 2 minutes that you're spending. I mean, I know when I talk to people, I tend to get a little bit like, oh, that, you know, a little bit up depending on the subject, but
Right.
90% of the time when I'm talking to people, it's, oh, you know, it's almost like that felt really good to have communication with somebody. And it doesn't necessarily have to be on this very deep level where you're like, tell me what you believe in or world peace. I think there's so much stuff. Like, we get bogged down in this. You know, I have a management client that I work with, and she always tells me, listen, I have 20 direct reports. How can I possibly take the time to get to know them? And I'm like, well, okay. How long have they been there? And so we kind of do an average. And she's like, my average tenure is about 6 years. I'm like, of 20 employees, that's actually pretty good.
Right.
Why do you think they stay? She's like, I have no idea. I go, have you asked them?
Right.
Why would I ask him that? Because if you can find out why they stay, you can continue to give them that.
Right.
And they'll stay. I said, have you ever when was the most recent time you hired somebody? And she goes, oh, I have this new hire. He's been with me for like 6 weeks, ready to kill him. And I'm like, why? And she said, because he's in my office all the time. And I'm like, okay, why is he in your office all the time? Well, because he needs me to tell him that he's doing a good job. And I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
She goes, but it annoys me. And I'm like, okay, who cares that it annoys you? Train him and he will continue to be one of those employees that's with you for the next 6-7 years. That way you're not having to train somebody, you know, what your turnover is like. Fortunately, you have a team that probably enjoys their work. But if you could just spend a little bit of time with them and get to know them, not only they're going to enjoy their work, they're probably going to be connected to the organization. Their productivity is going to go up. So, and you just said that with your gentleman. If you don't talk to him or you miss him, he tells his own story in his brain. Oh my God, Scott's pissed off at me. I'm going to suck. This day's going to suck and whatever. And it was like, dude, I just didn't see you with your, you know, you were in the bathroom when I walked in. I missed you. So,
And I mean, it's the negativity bias. We it's in our brains from when we were cavemen and cavewomen and things of that nature is to keep us safe. So we fear things. And so we all have this negativity bias where we will take, you know, 99% of compliments we ignore because one person maybe said something. So if you have somebody that really needs a lot of affirmation, you know, you got to make sure that you're given at least 3 times the amount of affirmation to any type of correction and stuff, because that is the kind of the ratio to overcompensate that negativity bias. So yeah, if somebody's coming into my office and they're constantly needing, you know, affirmation, you know, that is telling me something about this person that I need to know. So I need to make sure that I am heaping on, you know, and solidifying all that, hey, you're doing a great job, more so than I would need to maybe do with you because you're, you know, not that type of a person and stuff. And so, you know, I just got to file that away in my mindset. And you start to, I mean, you know how your friends are, you know how to interact with all your friends.
Right.
You know, he's new. So
I don't know. Maybe you don't have friends.
Yeah.
Maybe exactly. That's a whole nother podcast.
So yeah, I mean, he's telling you what you need, what he needs. You just have to listen and you have to pay attention. And like you said, ask the questions.
So I was joking with one of my friends the other day. I said, I'm going to put together a journal and it's going to be 10 conversations someone's going to steal this, 10 conversations you should have with your employee. And I'm going to put it in a journal format. And so that people can just simple questions so that they can jot it down. I can't remember what day of the week it is, let alone, what conversation I had with who. So if I could just have somewhere where I could track it, then I could be like, oh yeah. So Sally likes vacation time, but Katie likes bigger projects and Bobby likes to get a gold star every day of the week. So it's just, I can't remember that half the time, but if I write it down, I can always go back and review it. So, and one of my friends was like, oh my gosh, send me the template because I'll test it out for you. So
yeah, okay. It is. I mean, so I'm not like a lot of people that I work with, and I'm very kind of more relational. That's how I communicate. But when I would always interview new people, anybody, I mean, I don't care what's on your resume. You got to this point because you've made it through this thing, and you got to be good at what you do. I always try to get them talking, what's your favorite superhero? What books do you read and stuff to try to find out. Because when people start letting down the guard, they start to and they will tell you things, about what they want. And just by the stories, you can kind of start to glean, hey, okay, this person really likes this, or they really need this, and that is where you can really learn who the person is versus the image that anybody can put up in an interview, or the image they're going to try to project the first 6 weeks on their job. And you use those little things like your little 10 things of, hey, have these conversations. They will give you insight much more than just the normal things you'll learn.
100%. And I think sometimes, again, we're head down society, particularly managers, particularly senior leaders, head down. We're used to, hammering away, and yet we're not paying attention and we're losing workers and we're not taking the time to find out why. It's just, we're not robots, nor do we work on an assembly line of human beings where it's like, okay, I'm going to, plug in their arm today and tomorrow I'm going to work on their fingers and I'm going to build this human being. And they're not really a human. They're more like a robot. And it's this, churn and burn kind of society that I've seen more and more and more and more throughout my career. And even talking to some managers, or even some of my friends who are in managers, they're just like, this is crazy. I don't understand what's going on. I'm like, have you talked to people?
Yeah. Well, I mean, when you said head down, immediately I think, you walk into between a meeting or something and everybody has narcolepsy because their heads are down and they're looking at their phone. I mean, so we are, even on our downtime, and when we walk down the hallway, people are on their phone, and just that lack of interaction that is happening, hence the smartphone and everything that we have, it makes it even, harder because people aren't even communicating. If they're working hard, their heads down, but even in their downtime, they're not, communicating because their heads are down into their devices. So it makes it even more difficult.
Yeah, I ran into the elevator door today because my head was down. Like, oops, that was a nice reminder. Oh God, I'm an idiot. So there's this question that you have on your bio that I'm fascinated to learn more about. Why is FOMO and anxiety on the rise in the workplace?
Oh, wow. How long do we have?
I think it was just a nice tie-in when we're like talking head down, right? Like we're living other people's lives vicariously through our phones. And I almost think to some degree that's FOMO to me.
Yeah.
Or that anxiety because I'm not at the level that Katie's at, or I'm not at, I'm not out having fun in the Bahamas, or I'm not an influencer, God forbid.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's so many levels where this can go, and the reasons for it and things, just for your listeners that know that it exists. It's real. It's rampant. It is all over the place. I think it was something like, especially on the millennials, it was something like 70% of millennials were saying they suffered from FOMO and workplace anxiety and type of things. And the number of workdays, I think 18 million workdays were missed last year due to workplace anxiety and in this, this fear. And so on the FOMO piece, I always tie that into the pre-pandemic. Basically, the study said about 70% of employees felt if they were not constantly connected to their job or to work, then they were at a professional disadvantage. so they felt like they were missing out on something if they were on vacation or if they were at home with their kids, and they were constantly checking with work. And so they could not disconnect, so they couldn't unplug, and they felt that they were going to miss out something that was going to impact their career or something.
Holy crap.
So just on that aspect. So then you get people that, hey, isn't Tammy awesome? She emailed in those contracts from the beach when she was on her vacation. I'm like, no, that's horrible. Tammy, enjoy your family. You're not going to miss out on everything. And if my employees feel that they're going to somehow have a career negativity for taking off, what kind of a culture do I have at my job place that they feel that I can't even go and spend quality time with my kids, or I'm going to get punished or missed out on the promotion? I mean, we could spend hours talking about
my gosh,
but it's amazing.
Like the hair on the back of my neck just stood up. So FOMO, fear of missing out, for those of you that are like old school and don't know what FOMO is, I feel so in the know. Maybe I am an influencer in my own brain. Okay. So,
well, you have your 10 things in your little book. So you are an influencer.
I do. Oh my gosh. Thanks, Scott. That's helpful. But fear of missing out. So this isn't all about me, but I worked for an organization that I had a chief operating officer that I swear ran on about 17 minutes of sleep. So this chief operating officer literally would email me at midnight and then email me again at 4:00 in the morning. And I'm like, does this dude have this on a scheduler? Because yeah. But if I didn't respond by 6, he sent me another email. So I'm thinking, holy crap, to the point that I was so stressed out all the time that I literally was on my phone. That was from a manager, y'all.
Right.
That wasn't me, fear of missing out. That was a manager that was putting that kind of pressure on me.
Yeah.
So when I left that company, I said, this is bullcrap. I'm not doing this. And when I get direct reports, because I've had anywhere between 1 person to 115 people directly report to me at one time, I'm like, I am not going to put that kind of pressure on somebody, because I think that is asinine. And I know what it's like to like feel like you are. So fear of missing out, Scott talked about it in a good way. I also think that there's this fear of missing out that, holy crap, if I miss this, I'm going to get fired. So we tell this story in our brain. And I remember thinking, my employees should not feel that way. My employees should be able to get in the car, listen to Dairy Chair Diary podcast on their way home, and disconnect and go home and eat dinner and be with their family and do the cool stuff and not worry about work. But there is this huge, like this whole, you're right. We probably could spend a lot of time talking about that, which creates this really high level of anxiety in our employees. What does that do to productivity?
It just destroys it.
I'm like, that was almost a rhetorical question, but
it's true. I mean, you look at the data, FOMO, kind of drives overwork. And I mean, if you're working past 58 hours a week, I think it's like your productivity drops by like 60%. And if it's anything approaching 70 hours, your employer's getting no benefit from you. I mean, it's just your productivity, the mistakes and everything, it gets so significant, but that's kind of what it's driving. It's driving that culture of overwork. But at the same time, you're hurting your employees, you're hurting the quality you're receiving. And it's much better to have people. I mean, look at the rise of sabbaticals. I mean, you go back, there were several years ago, but the legal industry, your big law firms were having a massive problem with stressed out lawyers, substance abuse, because they were so stressed, they were overworked and they were overcompensating. So they started to force sabbaticals. After you've been here for a while, you have to take 6 months off. And it was really the change they saw was so much better and healthier, because this fear of overwork, it was just deteriorating their top talent, and they were self-medicating.
That's crazy. I mean, the unemployment rate is still incredibly low, and I mean, Scott and I are Gen Xers, so we've seen the unemployment rate be skyrocket. I graduated from college in the very early 90s, and we were kind of in the middle of a really bad economic turn where I had a degree in marketing.
Mm-hmm.
Go
Yeah.
find a job in marketing. I
Do you
graduated in
want fries with that?
1991. Yeah, it's funny. I actually worked in a little family owned gift shop right out of college. My mom's like, glad that degree's going to good use there.
Mm-hmm.
But it was all I could do. It was
Mm-hmm.
retail. And that at
Right.
that time, that was it. And I was appreciative of the fact that I had a job because I know the unemployment rate was definitely double digits at that time.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but now we don't have that luxury as an employer. And I know there are people out there that will argue with me that unemployment is on the rise, and 100% it is. I work or I live in a state that has very, very low unemployment. And when I talk to people about hiring, even recruiter friends of mine that I have trying to hire in this state is really, really hard. And that's Oklahoma, by the way. It's really hard. And we're having to compete with other companies where remote work is the norm. And
Right.
my company, you can't be remote. And it's because the job, like you're an
Right.
engineer,
Mm-hmm.
you have to go out to the market. And I mean,
Mm-hmm.
you work remote differently. It's not a
Yeah.
definite remote work from home job that people think of. But we in ourselves in my own organization have had to shift gears to become more attractive to people that need some flexibility.
Mm-hmm.
And remote work is flexibility. Maybe changing hours is flexibility. Maybe having people work 4 10s is flexible. And we really are having to shift to recruit
Right.
employees to come to work for us. And while money is still a driving force because
Mm-hmm.
getting a living comparable wage is a big deal, but it is not. I'm getting more and more questions on benefits, on paid
Right.
time off, on I don't want to say work life balance because I don't think you truly can be work life balance, but work life
Mm-hmm.
engagement so that it's
Right.
like I'm engaged at work, but I also can be engaged in home. Um, Management styles, promotion opportunities, and probably the biggest one that I've heard, and maybe Scott, you can speak to this, and you did just a couple of minutes ago, but real quickly was employee development.
Mm-hmm.
Like that has
Mm-hmm.
been probably some of the biggest questions that I've seen, or my recruiters are telling me they want companies to have the
Right.
ability to become either a better employer or just to develop professionally.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's so, um, especially in the millennial generation, and younger. And I use that a lot because starting in 2025, millennials are going to be the largest chunk of the workforce. 73% say that,
Wait, back up. Did you say 2025? Like as in
yeah,
next
next year.
year?
Next year, I
Holy
believe that
crap.
is
Sorry, I didn't mean
millennials
to.
become the largest chunk of the workforce. So
I
yeah,
had to pick
so
my mouth up off the floor.
yeah, I know, I know. I literally saw
Holy
you're
crap.
like, whoa, hey, stop. Let's rewind
Sorry.
for a second.
Sorry,
Uh,
I digress. But okay, go ahead.
but yeah, so but they were 73% were saying that mentorship was key to their career development. Is that they are really looking for not just a paycheck, but what else, an intangible benefit can I get out of this work experience that is going to help me on my career? And mentorship is learning from somebody, learning from a different sector, learning from somebody that's been there is key. And mentorship is something that most employers can implement very low cost. I mean, if there's web software that can manage it for you for very, very low cost, and as long as you're training the mentors first, because you don't want to have a crappy mentor and stuff, and make sure they understand. Yeah,
That's like crappy manager, crappy mentor.
yeah. Let's go. So I mean, but that is something that if you're a limited budget and you don't have, but you have a wealth of experience, you have a wealth of diversity in there, and you can pair people. I mean, it is huge, to help them, and that is kind of that I want. The younger generations really want that career of significance. They want it to mean something. They want it to benefit them. It's not just a transactional, where maybe my dad, he was like, I'm going to be here, and you give me a pension, and I'm going to put in my work, and we're good, and maybe I'm as loyal. It's a little bit more of like, hey, what can I give you in exchange for my time, or what can you give me for exchange for my time besides a paycheck? And this becomes so much more important because yeah, a lot of companies right after the pandemic, they started to pay more. They started to throw money at the problem because they couldn't hire people and wages were going up. But then we got this wonderful thing called, 7-8% inflation that basically eradicated all those raises.
Yep.
So those things of like intangible benefits are so much more important nowadays because companies can't go, well, I just gave a 10% raise. I can't do it again. And so these things are really can get a longer bang for your buck.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh. As you can tell, Scott and I get a little passionate about this. So I want to kind of wrap this up. I definitely would love to have Scott back on the pot. No pressure. No pressure. Would love to have
No
Scott back
pressure at all.
on the podcast. Because I think this is I know this is a critical topic, just speaking from pure experience and what I'm seeing being an employer, as well as an employee, because I'm
right
both. But and just talking to my management clients or even talking to coworkers or talking to my friends, I think some of this stuff is incredibly critical to making your organization be successful. And I think there are lots of ways that you can look at doing that. So I want to read kind of the little thing on Scott's book because I think it's a great opportunity for you to know what his book is about. It is called I Quit: Winning the War for Top Talent. So from the Great Resignation to Quiet Quitting, remote work, industry hopping, reskilling, and the gig economy, work is changing. If you have not figured that out in the past 30 minutes of the conversation that Scott and I have, then maybe you should go back and rewind this. So and the future of work as we know it is uncertain to those who are not prepared. So the whole point of not only our podcast, but Scott's book is to really, as an employer, look at ways that you can prepare your organization or be prepared as a manager. Scott provides a fascinating journey into the minds of the current workforce. He explores the psychological reasons behind the trending beliefs towards work and the ever-changing attitudes of modern day employees. I'm sure there's lots of research and great studies in there for you all to read. So I highly encourage you. We'll have a link in my show notes so that you can go out and download it. It's on Kindle. It's in the Amazon store. You can order a hard copy. Is it on Audible? Can I listen to it?
Yeah, it's on Audible and iTunes for the audiobook, and then hard copies on
awesome. That's perfect.
Amazon.
Any last piece of advice or any little nugget you want to leave the listeners with?
No, the only nugget they need to do is just to keep listening to your podcast because you are dropping some truth nuggets that they should just be feasting on the entire week until the next episode comes out.
Truth nuggets. I love that. It just reminded me of beaver nuggets from Buc-ee's. With that said, we're going to wrap up another episode of Dear HR Diary by Manage with Heart. The obvious unfiltered truth that you wish they taught you in management school. Once again, thank you to Scott. Such a great guest on the podcast today. And to those of you listening, to my fabulous listeners out there, stay fabulous until next time.